Irin Carmon is an Israeli-American feminist, author, blogger, and says here TV personality. She's a staff writer at Salon.com, where she focuses on politics and culture. And she joins us now from, I don't know, is it New York or Washington? Where are you?
I'm in New York.
Hi there. Thanks for coming on. Now,
Thank you, Michael.
This show is focusing on various issues, I suppose, coming from the left, faith and religion and balance of media and marriage. I want to speak to you about what is known as women's health. I'm not entirely sure what that means, though, because surely health is health, whatever gender.
Well, there is some health that affects women in particular, particularly when it comes to reproductive rights, sexuality, and so on. Those are somewhat specific to people who have uteruses.
Right. Is it? Why is that? Does a moral issue have a different answer if you're black, white, or male and female?
Well, I don't know about black and white, but I think, unfortunately, the reality is, although in any sane society, these would be treated just as healthcare issues that every person can adjudicate for themselves. In the United States, at least, they've become incredibly politicized. They have become moral issues, whereas, the public health view is that these are very much, neutral health issues that individual people have to make decisions for themselves about.
So the individual has a right to do pretty much whatever he or she wants to do, within reason, if it doesn't affect a third party. I think we probably agree on that. But the issue, and obviously implicitly you were referring to abortion, at least in part, surely here the issue is that there is another entity, another life, another human being, another person involved. You would accept that or reject that?
Well, I think that that's something that individual determination, plays a large role. Unfortunately, we're not just talking about abortion. In the United States, we're talking about the same people who are fighting to make access to abortion more restricted are also fighting to limit access to birth control and actually have very firm seated opposition to birth control. So I think we're actually really talking about reproductive autonomy, the right of a woman to decide when and if she wants to be pregnant, more than we're talking about the rights of the fetus. That's not to say that the fetus doesn't have rights at all, but when you actually look at the priority and the agenda of the anti-abortion movement, at least in the United States, it is very much focused on female sexual behavior. Right.
Actually, I mean, that's not completely accurate. There's some nuances here. Most of the people who do oppose abortion, I think we're safe in saying, come from a Christian background. Not exclusively, obviously there are other people involved, Muslims, Orthodox Jews and so on, and secular people. But the Catholic approach to contraception is very different from the evangelicals. I'm sure you know, of course, that the evangelical approach is that contraception is invariably acceptable. So I don't think that will be completely accurate. But let's talk about what we mean here, because when it comes to choice necessitates something positive, the freedom to speak, protest, walk, practice, whatever you want to do. We have to define when life begins, surely. That's an absolute. Not religious, it's completely scientific. When, for you, would life begin?
I mean, I think that life begins, I don't think people would think that the embryo or the fetus is not alive, per se. The question is, does its rights supersede the life of a woman? There's no question that what is growing inside a woman is alive, and if continued to gestate, will become a human being if born healthy.
Right.
But I think that what you have is a weighing of interests where, I don't believe in forced childbearing. I don't believe in forced pregnancy. I think a woman has a right to decide whether to continue a pregnancy to term that supersedes whatever life interests, at least in the first 6 months of pregnancy.
Right. So the right of a woman to choose whether she's pregnant and continues with the pregnancy or not is more important than the right to life. That I find rather confusing.
I don't find it confusing at all. I think that we always, in any sort of moral calculation, we weigh the values and the relative weight of each actor. And I think that a living person, that we don't have the right to demand that another being can take residence up in another person's body that cannot survive on its own.
Well, it's not moving.
And require them to continue.
Yeah, it's not like changing apartment. It's not, moving in the furniture and the TV and the laptop. And taking up residence sounds rather clinical. Look, there's certain scientific absolutes here. That at the point of conception, the child has a totally distinct DNA and genomic character, unlike anyone who's ever been born or will be born in the future. It doesn't look like a baby particularly, but then, listen, I'm 53. I don't look like I did when I was 2 years old. Can it survive outside of the womb? Of course it can't at this stage, but then we have 4 kids, believe me. You leave a newborn child outside the womb, it's dead within 2 hours. The arguments against the distinct life of the child seem to be based on emotion, whereas the arguments against abortion seem to be rooted in morality and science.
I don't think that they're, I think in fact the arguments for abortion access are actually based on public health realities, which is that abortion has always existed. It's sometimes existed in ways that are very harmful to a woman's life because it has been unregulated, it has been illegal, it has been underground. Women have always found ways to end their pregnancies. And, in Canada, you guys have a much lower abortion rate than we do here, and that's partly because you have better access to abortion early on. You have better access to sex education, health information, contraception. In this country, we cannot even come to any sort of consensus about making contraception more accessible. So again, I want to go back to your point that you made about, evangelicals are not against birth control. Well, Mike Huckabee, who is a very prominent evangelical, said, today we're all Catholics in objection to an administration decision to make birth control more available through private health insurance.
Well, that's not really what he said, actually, is it? I mean, I actually...
No, it is what he said.
Well, I read it quite specifically, and I know him. What he actually said was, we are all Catholics in terms of facing up to oppression. And what the Catholic Church has said, including left-wing Catholics, such as Notre Dame in the class action of 43 organizations against the Obama administration, is, listen, it's not about contraception. They've said it's about conscience. We are not even going to comment on the availability.
I don't believe that.
If I may finish the point, honestly, it's basic freedom of expression. You've had a lot of time. I'm allowed. It's about choice. You see, I choose to say this. What they've said is that the right to contraception is another issue entirely. This is forcing Catholics to pay for and provide something with which they disagree. But let's talk about this issue. I mean, I don't know how well you know Canada, and it's a very, how shall I put it, a very sanguine view from your point of view of the country. But this idea that we have universal contraception and abortion and very low abortion rate, and America's radically different. The numbers are almost identical, and access is pretty much the same in the US as it is here. But you haven't addressed the fundamental, which is, look, choice is very important, but if it's a human life, and we've established that it is, you might not want that human life. And most of the victims of abortion, of course, are black and brown and female and handicapped, the vast majority. You may not want that life, but surely you don't have a right to take it. I mean, it's always been around, but so was rape and genocide. It doesn't justify them.
Well, I think that the quote-unquote victims of abortion, I mean, you act as if there are sort of external actors coming in and telling people to have abortions. I believe that it's an individual woman's right to decide whether she's going to continue to carry pregnancy to term. Pregnancy is an extremely risky, emotionally and physically taxing process.
Do you know South Asian culture? Do you know about gender-selected abortion?
Yes.
Do you know about the pressure that's being brought to bear on inner-city black communities? Do you know that a Down syndrome child probably has a 5% chance of actually being born? I mean, is that a culture that you aspire to?
I don't believe in reproductive coercion of any kind, whether it's to continue pregnancy or not to continue pregnancy. And I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say that there is a culture of pressure in African American communities. What you have in African American communities is a lot of access to care health disparities and a very high rate of unintended pregnancy.
Yeah.
That is what leads to the high abortion rate in the African American community.
And a lot of very wealthy white people opening abortion areas in black communities.
That's not the case.
Well, it is.
Statistically proven.
And I'll
no,
send you the
not.
figures if you would like of how many have been open in the past 10 years.
I will
and
send
also
you
a racist war on trying to diminish the number of black people in the United States. Anyway, fascinating discussion. We're out of time.
That's
our choice.
False.
Thank you
that
so very much.
False.
Thank you.